Nightcast. Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth brings you the current news from the world today and how it relates to Bible prophecy. Understanding the end-time events leading to the peaceful world tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth.
Good evening, friends, and welcome to this March 18, 2015 edition of Nightcast. You may wonder, well, Steve, why are you dressed so informally? You usually wear your coat, your tie, your white shirt. You're just in an everyday shirt. And the reason for that, friends, is because at least two reasons. One is our video player system hasn't been working for the past couple of days. It's not working tonight. I'm not able to play you the current day's news reports the way we normally do, and I'm just coming on informally, and so I'm dressed informally, to explain why we haven't been on the past couple of nights. That's one of the reasons. And the second reason relates to a couple of things personally. One is that I've been having a major back problem. I've been wearing a back brace all day today. I've taken it off tonight so I could speak a little easier, but once I get up out of this seat, I may want to go put it back on for a while. That's part of a personal reason. And the second is that tomorrow we have a major, I do this broadcast from the second floor of my home in Alabama. And I've got a major water problem that, major of the degree that one water company quoted me $9,000 to repair it. Another company that quoted me less was still in the multiple thousands. And in order to save as much money as possible, I've been hiring people to do, non-licensed people to do the thing like digging the trench that needs to be dug and other parts of the work. I've been doing some of that myself just to save as much as possible, because every dime I spend on repairs and things like that affect the home take away from the monthly money of my income that I use to keep this operation going. Now, yes, a few people have, from time to time, provided some helps here, which I've greatly appreciated, but there's been very few, and we don't ask for it, just like Mr. Armstrong did a work where he didn't ask the public for money. Mr. Collins, who first chaired this program, started out the same way. Now, there were a number of people who supported him when he was hosting this program. As soon as he died, all those people stopped. And that's fine, because we didn't have this as a goal for, hey, let's grab sheep and grab tithes. Our goal from the beginning between both of us was a great emphasis on this being a service, that if it was to grow and be built, we asked God to build it, and if he wasn't in it, that he would close the doors on it. Now, I've been thankful to hear Mr. Armstrong say many times that the whole time he was doing the work, his whole lifetime, more than 50 years of doing the work, he said it was a struggle the whole time. Even though you saw 30% increase year after year, and there were times when that didn't happen because there would be troubles caused by tears and what have you, and people, and maybe God wanted even Mr. Armstrong to learn something now and then. But overall, you saw great strides in the work, and yet Mr. Armstrong still said his part was always a struggle, and yet he also acknowledged that all the good and all the wonderful things, the many miraculous and wonderful things that showed God's hand in it, he acknowledged that it was God doing that. And yet, with God doing that and the miraculous things God did, it was a struggle. And so, with that, armed with that information, when I'm having some struggles, such as I'm having right now, the back problem, the need to do that major water work with an inspection tomorrow morning that's scheduled, that I'm not ready for. I'm going to have to ask them to reschedule the inspection. The plumber is coming over early, though, in the morning, and maybe they'll get delayed, and maybe we'll get it pulled together. I've bought all the parts and things, and I'm only telling you this, friends, to explain why we haven't been on last couple of nights. And so you may be saying, well, why are you coming on tonight if you're not really ready to do this program? You can't play the videos and what have you. Well, part of the reason I'm doing that is, as I just mentioned, to explain why we haven't been on and whether we're going to be on again. God willing, we plan to be. And to explain also why we haven't been on. What else was I going to tell you about? Oh, the other is to keep from losing momentum. And we need to talk about some of the complex things in the news because the momentum, even of not only of our momentum in this program, but the momentum in the news and the complexity of the news for the past not only few days, past couple of weeks. We need to talk about those things, else things kind of gallop and get away from you. And for me, if I miss a program or two, the loss of momentum, it makes it much harder to get back on with the program. So I prayed about this earlier tonight, and the answer came, just go do the program informally, explain why you haven't been on, talk about the complexity of the news of the moment, just ad-lib it, even though you can't show the videos. Let's talk about what's happening currently. You know, let's talk about Russia for a moment, and let's talk about Israel and their recent elections where Prime Minister and his Likud party is has been elected, back in office. I'm going to say thankfully. I'm saying thankfully because I'll explain that in a moment. Some of you will understand why you yourselves are saying thankfully. But let's talk about Russia. You know, the Prime Minister, the President of Russia, Putin, disappeared for 11 days, and there's been a lot of talk about that by several news analysts, commentators, people who daily do opinion broadcast, some of them extremely astute, and some of them who have some tremendous research people behind them, and they're really coming in there right on the beam, right on the mark, understanding things historically that are going on and the way things are shaping into a, quote, new world order, potentially, and with the old caliphate wanting to be the world ruler, being able to move in a position where it looks like that could happen from their aspect, and with Russia wanting to rule the world and have communism in there, and the fact that back in World War and the fact that the United States is having internal struggles in an extreme way, and the pride of the United States apparently being lowered and lowered and lowered. And yet it still has a certain amount of power that it's able to arm flex and give Israel, its brother Judah, a hard time. And there's a prophecy. We put the scripture up on the screen. I'm not able to do that tonight without the player that that plays our video news stories. But I put up Isaiah 9:21 several times. Let me just grab my Bible and we'll go to that. I've also put up other scriptures, but that one that comes to mind at the moment talks about how the two brothers, Ephraim and Manasseh, the UK and the United States, they will have struggles between themselves, Ephraim, Manasseh, Manasseh, Ephraim, and yet they'll buddy together and both together go against their brother Judah. Now, we've got Isaiah, Jeremiah, so we want Isaiah chapter 9. Let's look at that just for a moment. Some of you have been amazed that that scripture's in the Bible. Like, wow, I never saw that before. Well, it's been there. It's there, and let's take a look at it. It says in verse 21, Isaiah 9, Manasseh, Ephraim, Manasseh. This is not the first time I've read this verse. We put the scripture up on the screen for you several times here. Manasseh, Ephraim, Manasseh. They all tassel and tussle and have their, arm wrestlings and what have you. Ephraim on top one time and Manasseh on top another time. Manasseh, Ephraim, and Ephraim, Manasseh. And they together shall be against Judah. That's what it says right there, verse 29. It goes on to finish that verse and says, for all this his anger is not turned away, but his hand is stretched out still. So this will go on for a little while. When we're already starting to see rumblings of Manasseh, the United States, being again, Ephraim and Manasseh are the two sons of Joseph, and they carry the name of Joseph as two half-tribes of the 12 tribes of Israel being that their father, the father of Ephraim and Manasseh, is Joseph, one of the 12 sons of Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel. Ephraim primarily carries the name of Joseph, but so does Manasseh, and they are two brothers. And they're traceable, Ephraim to the UK and Manasseh to the United States. And so the UK and the US, they'll have their tussle with one another, and yet they'll team together against Judah. They'll both together be ultimately against Judah. That's a prophecy for the last days. We're already seeing many rumblings of that. Even now, Prime Minister Netanyahu ran his campaign on the basis that if he were reelected, he would not support a two-state solution in the Middle East. Now that he's been reelected, the United States, not only the United States, but the United Nations and the EU has been announced as being prominent in the news, and the UK is part of the EU. Not the Eurozone, but part of the EU, at least at the moment. And so those three, the US, the EU, and the UN, have been announced prominently as wanting Israel to support, calling on Israel to, now that you're back in there, Netanyahu, let's get a two-state solution back on the table. Look, you're asking him to go against his election campaign prodigy. He's said in his campaigning, if he got reelected, there would be no new two-state solution. He's not in favor of it all. He's already seen what happens when you give land for peace. When they gave Gaza, that turned out to prove itself to be an extremely egregious mistake, because the Palestinians simply wound up using Gaza as a launching pad for missiles against the Israeli citizens. So, should the Israelis make the mistake further? Should they continue that kind of mistake? Well, giving that land and for peace didn't work. Let's give more land and have more unpeace. Have more places from which the Palestinians and the Arab people can launch missiles against us with their goal of the annihilation of Israel. Let's give them more footage, more bases to promulgate that goal of destroying Israel from. And let's weaken our security, our needed border security even further. Let's give away more land. Let's let them have at us. But here's where this leads to. Now, this is the complexity of this. By taking that strong position against a two-state solution, that puts, unfortunately, Israel, Mr. Prime Minister Netanyahu, and all of Israel, that puts them in a position where the rest of the international community, including the current administration of the U.S., those in leadership in the EU, and those from the UN who have, there are a lot of countries that are part of the UN that are against Israel existing at all. And so Mr. Netanyahu being reelected with a position of no two-state solution just puts further animosity against Israel on the part of the international community, because unfortunately, a two-state solution has been promoted so much without people thinking about how it would really work, and without people thinking about how far back the real cause and effect of a animosity between Ishmael and Israel. And that includes more than Judah. It's all of the offspring of Isaac. But all of the offspring of Isaac and Ishmael being an animosity between them because of Ishmael's jealousy of, not only jealousy, but also their false teaching against God having given a promise to Abraham's offspring through Isaac. Through the Quran, Ishmael wants to claim, no, God didn't give this promise to the offspring of Abraham through Isaac. He gave it to the offspring of Abraham through Ishmael. That's what the Quran says. The Quran, which is not God's word, it's just it's a false religious book that spins a tale that's not true. God's word in his writings in the Bible, the Holy Bible, can be proved because of the things in the Bible where God says, test me, try me. If these things can be broken, then my word is no good here. And so, friends, that's the complexity of that situation as it goes back to Ishmael and Isaac, and Ishmael's animosity against God selecting Isaac for the sons of promise, having promised that land to the sons, the offspring of Isaac. And Ishmael hates that. He even hates God for doing that. So he promotes a lie and promotes the teachings and falsehoods of the God of this world, which people think is the real God. And they're deceived, and people, as Mr. Herbert Armstrong has said, a man who is deceived doesn't know that he's deceived, or he wouldn't be deceived. The very definition of deceived is somebody who's in ignorance and not knowing it. Otherwise, he wouldn't be deceived. And so they're sincere in their beliefs, but they're sincerely wrong. And so we've got a world that's majority of which, we need to go back, and I'm speaking primarily to those who God has called to the spring harvest. But for those of you who may be tuning in and watching this, it'd be good for you to be aware of this too. Revelation 12, verse 9 says that the whole world has been deceived. It says, and the great dragon was cast out. The great dragon, the verse explains itself. Verse 9 of Revelation 12 explains that great dragon is that old serpent called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. Now, that's God's word telling us that the devil has deceived a few people here and a few people there. No, his word in verse 9, Revelation 12 says, who has deceived the whole world, except for a few people God has called out now. Now, there are some other issues. There's a lot of internal strife inside the United States. We have to be careful about how we talk about that because I realize there are some who are going to be offended. There's some who want to promote a lie in that way. They have their goals they hope to achieve, and they'll use a lie if they can to achieve it. And we're in a situation where it's true that God's civil government is not in force or effect right now because even Israel decided to have its own king, and then it became disobedient and went into captivity. And the governments of this world, the Roman government, came into full vogue. And we are subject to a situation where, going all the way back to Adam and Eve rejected the tree of life, ate of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. As Mr. Herbert Armstrong has well explained, that is a situation where it symbolizes man deciding for himself what's right and wrong, deciding to take that prerogative to himself instead of listening to his Creator. And so we're in a situation where, but in spite of the fact that we're in a situation where we're subject to governments of this world that are writing the lesson in history that man without God cannot govern himself and would ultimately lead to the annihilation of all mankind, except that in Matthew 24, verse 22, Christ says that just at the moment when mankind would otherwise annihilate all mankind, for the elect's sake, he will intervene in world affairs and return and stop man from blowing up all mankind off the face of this earth. Let's read that verse, Matthew 24, verse 22. Then I'll try to wrap up this little summary of what's happening in the news and where we kind of are and where we'll be picking up with daily news as soon as we're able to get back on daily. Verse 22, Matthew 24, and except those days, well, let's back up to verse 21. It says, for then shall be great tribulation. So that's a point in the future. It hasn't come yet. That's the next major event in prophecy, is the great tribulation. Let's put the chart up on the screen for a moment and pull it forward. And you'll see that preceding the great tribulation, there are 4 seals from the book of Revelation 6. The first one being depicted by a white horse, religious deception. I just read you the verse from Revelation 12, verse 9. Revelation 12, verse 9, which says that old dragon, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. And in plain language in Matthew 24 and in the parallel chapters, Mark 13, Luke 21, Jesus Christ explained that man would come and deceive many. He said, many will come in my name, saying that I, Jesus Christ, am indeed and in fact the Christ, and yet they would deceive many. And he warned us to be careful and not be deceived. The second seal, depicted by a red horse, Jesus Christ described in plain language as war, rumors of war, and world war, nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom. We've had 2 rounds of world war in the last little more than 100 years. And that first one starting back in, 1914, running to about 1918, being finalized in treaty form in 1919, then a recess until 1939, 1940, when round 2 commenced again, and until 1945, and we've been in, World War has been in the abyss and the pit until round 3 revives it in the future, when the 7th head, mentioned in Revelation 17, verse 10, there are 7 kings, six of them have come and gone, 5 are fallen. It says 1 is, that is was written for the present tense time of 1936 to 1945, that being Mussolini. He's now come and gone. So the latter part of Revelation 17, verse 10 says, and 1 is yet to come. After the one that is between 1936 and 1945, there would be 1 yet to come, who is still yet to come, even now in the year 2015. We don't know who that will be yet, but friends, let's come out a moment and let's see. How do I get that back on the screen? Right there. Okay, let's go out of the let's go out to where I can show you some things on the slide on the screen behind me. We've talked about before. Here are pictures of the 5 kings that are fallen in Revelation 17, verse 10, and the picture of the one that is between 1936 and 1945. In the upper left-hand corner, we start with the first king, Justinian, who was crowned by the Pope. Then Charlemagne, crowned by the Pope. Then the third of those kings was Otto the Great. He was crowned by the Pope. And then Charles V. He was the 4th king whom the Pope coronated. You can see him wearing the crown of the Holy Roman Empire, which the Pope has the, what would you call it, the honor, the duty of placing that crown on the dictator, the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, during the coronation ceremony that he precedes over. And then the 5th of those 5 kings that are fallen was Napoleon, who reigned between 1804 and 1814, or some accounts say 1815, and period of 9.5 or 10 years, and ending a period that the Bible describes as a continuous reign of 1,260 years of the Holy Roman Empire, continuing in its authority in a continued state, uninterrupted, for 1,260 prophetic years. Then, from 1814 or 1815 until Mussolini came on the scene in 1936. And after invading Ethiopia, he announced that he, after receiving a concordant from the Vatican, had revived the Holy Roman Empire. Mr. Herbert W. Armstrong observed and noticed that, got revealed that to Mr. Armstrong, and Mr. Armstrong then announced that on a coast-to-coast broadcast in the United States and into Canada and into other areas in the North, South American prominence, being broadcast also on a 100,000-watt station out of Mexico, and announcing it at the time that it was in occurrence that Mussolini had revived the Holy Roman Empire and was the sixth head of that empire, meaning that once he went into the abyss after he was killed and then hung upside down along with his mistress and comrades from a canopy of an Esso gasoline station in Italy, that put the Holy Roman Empire back into a dormant status. It put it back in the abyss, back into the pit, lying dormant from 1945, April 28, 1945, when Mussolini was killed, until the present day, until a new king will wear this crown that you see in the middle of this picture, the crown of the Holy Roman Empire. We don't know who will be wearing that yet. We know that the woman that Revelation depicts as the head of a church, symbolically a church, will hold the coronation ceremony because it'll revive the Holy Roman Empire. So the Pope will be involved, and he will hold the coronation ceremony, most likely in the place where he's held it in the past, in Frankfurt, Germany, where the Emperor's Hall is located and where it's been rebuilt following World War II. And that'll be the time of the Great Tribulation, the time when round 3 of World War will revive. That'll be the time when God's two witnesses are testifying. It'll be the time of a great martyrdom of God's saints. It'll be the time when those who are accounted worthy, as Christ says in Luke 21, verse 36, will be taken to a place of nourishment that's mentioned in Revelation and described in Daniel 11, verses 40, 41, 42, as a place just east of the Lake Tiberias, of the waterway that runs between Lake Tiberias and the Dead Sea. That triangulates in the land of the children of Ammon, the Edomites, and the Moabites. And all of that's a triangulation where Petra is located just east, as I mentioned, of that waterway that runs between Lake Tiberias and the Dead Sea. So this is what we're looking for to happen. Now, some of these people who are analyzing world news now, friends, are doing a pretty masterful job at it in many ways, and yet they don't fully understand all that's involved because they don't understand the prophetic things. They don't understand who the United States is in prophecy, who the UK is in prophecy, who France is in prophecy. They don't even fully understand who Germany is in prophecy, although some do understand that Germany is the modern-day version of old ancient Assyria, which traces way back to early periods and battles mentioned in the Bible. And some understand who the first 5 kings, many students in many religious colleges and universities around the country are taught who are, and they understand who are the 5 kings that are fallen, that are mentioned in Revelation 17, verse 10, and yet many don't understand that the 6th king has come and gone. They don't understand who that is. There are theories right and left naming this person and that person, and yet God gave it real simple to Mr. Armstrong to see that Mussolini had made a concordant with the Vatican, which is a requirement for being part of the Holy Roman Empire. The Vatican has to be involved to make it the Holy Roman Empire. Mussolini had a concordant with the Vatican, He invaded Ethiopia, gained the territories around there that enabled him to make a legitimate claim to having revived the Holy Roman Empire, a claim that lasted for 9.5 years, close to the period of time that Napoleon reigned, 9.5 or 10 years, depending on which date's the correct date for the end of Napoleon's rule, whether it be 1814 in April or some period of time in 1815, as some accounts are reading now. It's making a little confusion, but still, either way, Napoleon was in power for 9.5 or 10 or 10.5 years. Similar period of time that Mussolini was in reign as the sixth head of the Holy Roman Empire for 9.5 years. And between late 1936, the fall of 1936, until the springtime, April 28 of 1945. That's when Mussolini was in power as the sixth head. And the point there, even if people didn't understand who it is, if they know the sixth one has come and gone, Revelation 17 verse 10 says, one is yet to come. So that's what we're looking for, one king yet to come. And we're looking for, in a situation where the king of the north pushes against the king of the south, vice versa, and the king of the north, the European Union, puts an army around Jerusalem. The abomination of desolation is set up, and then those in the know and the wise know that, it's time to flee, and God will make that way, because God says he will fly those who are, Luke 21:36, accounted worthy to escape to a place that he has prepared, Revelation 12, Revelation 17, in the wilderness, where they'll be nourished, protected, trained in final training for 3.5 years during the 2.5 years of the Great Tribulation. Again, that's the next major thing to come in prophecy. The first four seals have been operative for a long time, but then following that, the fifth seal, depicted as and explained in plain language by Jesus Christ as the Great Tribulation, a time Jesus Christ says is so bad that nothing since the beginning of the world has been as bad as what's coming in the Great Tribulation, no, nor ever shall be, thankfully, as Christ put it. Nothing ever in the future will ever be as bad as what's coming either, but you can escape it if you are Luke 21:36 wise and watching world events daily. And so, friends, even though I'm not able to show you the news today, the main stories are this. We know that Prime Minister Netanyahu has been reelected to office in Israel. We know that he takes a strong position of wisdom that a two-state solution will not work. Land for peace has proved by giving away Gaza, it doesn't work. That does not work. That's a dumb approach. And those pushing for that, in spite of the dumbness behind it, are adding fuel to the passions and the flames and the hopes and the desires of those who would like to annihilate Israel. And so that animosity, that situation is just going to flame more and more till eventually the international community gets involved. The EU will bound up. And then there's another thing in the news that we need to watch and realize, wow, this major thing that suddenly has happened here with just a few weeks to Passover to go. And that is the insistence of Greece for debt relief and what have you has so infuriated Germany that Germany has come out and said, Greece, all of that is not only, we're not going to go along with that, but you are no longer welcome or wanted in the EU. Where for a while Germany had thought they needed Greece, now they're so infuriated by the demands Greece has made that they don't want them as part of the EU. So there's a situation there, and that's going to have impact on the euro, and we'll see how all of that plays around yet. And the climate, that creates the climate for war and the revival of a world war. That and the events happening with Russia and Ukraine And the disappearance of Russia's president for 11 days, and some talk about it was a love child situation, and others saying, well, wait a minute, the military leader of Russia has made statements reminding President Putin how, as history could repeat itself, he could disappear if he doesn't shape up and get in line with their desires. And they want communism back in the fore, and they want that land of Ukraine. And NATO lining up as it has with a long stretch through the many states in Europe is causing Russia to come back strongly and threatening nuclear warfare. So, and with Putin being told he better get in shape with that, or he could wind up like former leaders of Russia. So it's a extreme situation, and all of that, like some commentators have well stated astutely and prudently and recognized, even though they don't recognize who's who in prophecy, they have it recognized there's a potential for a big change of new world order. And the interest that the sons of Joseph, the UK and the US and France, have known and established for many decades, and the past decades, about to see that flipped on its head back to an old Caliphate Istanbul type situation where the Roman Empire will come back into the fore. And we got to watch that. We got to watch and see how that'll play out. And we are trying to watch that daily and keep a good handle on it. So some who are recognizing things that are potential, and yet they don't recognize who the prophetic players actually are and why things will go a certain way they have, and why, as one commentator put it, the Roman Empire development and the Caliphate situation may wind up in Syria instead of Turkey, as he thought it would for a while. You know, you got to know who Turkey is. Turkey is the brother of Jacob, and the brother who would have been the firstborn, except that Jacob in the womb grabbed Jacob's leg and pulled it back, and or grabbed his arm. And even though they had tied a string around the arm when the arm extended from the womb, Jacob pulled that arm back in, and Jacob made his way out first. And so he supplanted his brother, even from the womb. And then after Esau came back from a big hunt with his mother's help, was his mother involved then? But yeah, I think she was. Jacob made a pot of soup and talked Esau into selling his birthright. And then as their father, Jacob, is about to die and do a blessing on them, the mother helped Jacob to fool their father. And God honored all this because God had it in mind anyway to make Jacob the first. They didn't have to do all that Jacob supplanting stuff they did, but they did. It did it that way. And so Esau hates Jacob. There's an animosity there, but he also loves him. There's a love-hate relationship going there. And Esau, Edom, is your modern-day Turkey. And so the United States, Brother Manasseh, and the UK, especially Brother Manasseh, has been able to have bases in Turkey. And with the love side of Edom, Esau has been able to have bases out of Turkey and have a lot of things work favorably there. But then more lately, Brother Esau turning more against, flip-flopping in his love for Israel, including Manasseh, United States, and Judah in the Middle East. And the real hatred by Ishmael, which are your people in Syria. So you got to watch, where's this thing going? And where will the king of the South operate out of? Who will actually be the king of the North, which we've understood is going to be the United Europe, that'll put the armies to surround Jerusalem. Hey, as it falls, as the puzzle pieces fall into place, we know what we're looking for. we'll just have to watch as it plays out, where they all fit right into place. And there's a certain thing that when those armies surround Jerusalem, you know, friends, that's the time God says, 1335, you got 45-day countdown, then 30-day countdown, your 1290, and then your 1260 begins. Between 1260 and 1290, when you see the 1335, know that, God's going to be, short time after that, the fleeing is going to come. So be ready, because God is going to make the way for that, and those who are accounted worthy will know that God's announcement to go is that it's timely, and that's the time to go. And however He does it and says it, we do it. And if you miss that, you miss the boat. You miss a big boat, you wind up left behind in the Great Tribulation. Something not too desirable to be in the middle of, since Jesus Christ has described that as a time of trouble, Jacob's trouble, that's so bad nothing since the beginning of the world to this time has ever been so bad. No, nor ever will be. And if you want to see where that is, that's in Matthew 24. We just got to get somewhere around verse 20 where Christ is describing the Great Tribulation. I'll end with this, friends, because doing a long just ad-libbing tonight. Matthew 24, take a look at verse 21 where Christ says, well, back up. Let's back up to verse 19. Woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. But, well, if you really want to see it, go back to verse 15 where Christ is talking about, when therefore you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place, whoso reads, let him understand. Take a look at Daniel 12, verse 11, if you want to see who will understand that. Then verse 16, let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains. That is a double meaning. A lot of prophecy is dual. It not only meant physically in a location in Judea, but those who are spiritually in Judah. And it meant literally, let them flee into the mountains from Judea. But for us, God says He'll fly us on the wings of a great eagle. And so He'll provide the flight. Just be ready for it, for that moment. Let him which is, verse 17, let him which is on the housetop not come down to take anything out of his house. It's going to be an urgent time of escape. And He'll explain in another chapter that you should pray, well, even in this one, verse 20, pray that your flight be not in the winter nor on the Sabbath day, a time of great urgency and a difficulty. You don't want to be doing it in the winter, and because of the extremeness of it, the burden of it, you don't want to be doing it on the Sabbath, on a day that we are to observe as a time of worship toward God and holiness. But He says, I skipped ahead back to verse 17. Let him which is on the housetop not come down to take anything out of his house. Neither, verse 18, let him which is in the field return back to take his clothes. And verse 19, woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. But verse 20, pray that your flight. So we're talking about a flight, a fleeing. And God says in Revelation that it'll be via the wings of a great eagle. He'll provide that flight. Pray that your flight be not in the winter, nor neither on the Sabbath day. For, verse 21, then shall be great tribulation, and this is the point I was wanting to make. Then shall be great trouble, mega trouble, great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. Thankfully, it won't be happen again in the future. And verse 22, except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved alive, Moffat translation, but for the elect's sake, Christ promises those days will be shortened. We'll shorten this broadcast. That's all for tonight, friends. Thank you for joining me on this informal talk while I'm not able to show the news video. Hopefully, if not by tomorrow night, by Sunday night of next week, we'll be back able to do that. Hope you appreciated the little informal talk as explaining why we haven't been on the last couple of days, and some just general commentary ad-libbing about the current complexity of the news situation and what is developing with the potential of a real change in the shape of things over in Europe and the Middle East. Until next time, friends, this is your host for Nightcast, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth, saying thanks for joining me. So long. And until next time, good night, friends.
You have been watching Nightcast with Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth. Nightcast can be seen Sunday through Thursday nights here on cogtv.org. Tonight's program is also available anytime on demand in the cogtv.org video archive.